Well, hello there. Welcome to Aspects of The Empire Strikes Back. Today we're going to be looking at scale forms for flutes. So this is just something that has always kind of bugged me, really. I want to know a little bit more about the filigree that John Williams uses all the way through the various films, because it's something that happens frequently. Flute seems like a sort of quite a good place to start. And part of the reason I did this was because I wanted to find out how easy or difficult it is to play octatonic scales on the flute. And actually what I discovered is that in terms of the quantity of octatonicism, there's actually quite limited with the scale patterns, and that most of them tend to be either modal or just sort of regular scales. So I thought we'd have a look at it at this point. One of the things which I've been learning is Dorico, so I'm incredibly slow still. So please don't shoot the messenger. I'm doing my best. But there are quite a few times where, pardon me, I just don't quite get it. But that's my failing, not Dorico's failing. It's just I'm just trying to get used to a new bit of software, really. That's kind of what I've been doing. Yeah, here we go. So this is basically an overview of all the different scale forms for flutes in The Empire Strikes Back. So I've got, this was, by the way, done on Sibelius, and then I sort of saved it as music XML, and then I've completely tidied it up by going into various windows and libraries and engraving options and stuff like that. So I've kind of, changed my font back to Gill Sans and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. So the first one is, interesting enough, one of the few ones that is octatonic, which is 1M3 2M1 Luke's Escape, bar 39. So I've done various bits here. So I'll put this online for everybody, I think, on this one, because I think it's sort of quite useful. I'll save it as a PDF. It's already on Sibelius anyway, so I can do sort of Dorico Sibelius PDF. And hopefully that's enough. And then you can kind of, match the two and sort of, use them as a bit of a resource, really. So there are a few things which spring to mind. First of all, generally speaking, they're quite fast note values, because, of course, filigree generally is. The second thing is that, generally speaking, he uses smaller note values followed by higher note values, although in some instances, not always. Sometimes they're 6 and 7s, but it's rare that that is the case. So, for example, this one, it just sounds like a 13, so, which is kind of what it is. But because it's in the middle of a minim beat, it probably makes more sense to divide it into 2 quarter note beats or 2 crotchet beats. So generally speaking, it's sort of 5s and then 6s, or 6 and then 7s, rather than the other way round. You wouldn't write 7 and then 6 and sort of slow down as you go through. But of course, like with everything, there is always an exception. And I remember that just sort of doing this a little bit, I kind of saw occasionally you get sort of fast note values and then slower ones and fast ones. But they're generally speaking, because otherwise you would be writing, a tuplet of 20 over the bar line, that sort of thing. So that's sort of the reasoning for it. Anyway, let's have a look at a bit more detail about the scale patterns. So, for example, here, this is a controlled octatonic scale. And then chromatic. So he changes the pattern. And when I say controlled octatonic, it's basically an octatonic scale starting on C sharp. So that's just the flute sound with those. That would be octatonic T1, so transposed by 1 semitone. Mark Richards would call it octatonic 2, not to be confused, hopefully, but we just have different ways of numbering things. But if you follow his phenomenal course, which I highly recommend, on octatonic and hexatonic patterns and scales and harmony as used in action music cues with John Williams, then I heartily recommend it. Here it's controlled by the same, in the sense that it's going down, but then it doesn't go to a D flat or a C sharp at that point, and it stays there. So it's controlled in the sense that it changes pattern. So once we get to here, that augmented second, then a semitone, then it's mostly chromatic. So I'm just sort of going through it just so you can see how it's really controlled carefully. It's something that you kind of need to judge yourself. But essentially the main patterns is that goes down the beginning of each of the passages of sextuplets, and then it sort of goes, much smaller intervals, with two little bits of sequences as well. So generally speaking, he'll use, if there is a sequence, the third time will break out of that sequence. So here, that's the breakout there. So we've got sequence 1 over there. We've then got sequence 2, and then sequence 3 and 4, etc. And then we've got a sort of different thing here. If I do that one, it's a shame that for some reason I should have just changed this all before, but I didn't. So that's the sort of breakout. Let's change the size of that. Maybe to that. That'll do. And I'll just do that. Will that work? Yeah, there we go. So that kind of just about works as well on that one. So an interesting one to start off with, octatonicism and then chromaticism. So he does mix and match some of these things. Then we've got sort of unusual little bit of filigree, which is actually quite unusual. So it's his usual sort of flat 6. So that's an F sharp minor chord. And then he goes to a diminished 7th and then down augmented 2nd as well. Which is, sorry, diminished 2nd as well. So kind of weird. Sorry, diminished 3rd, I should say, because it's C sharp and E flat, C, D, E, 3 letter names. That's the 3rd. So then we move swiftly on to Luke's Rescue, which is just a straightforward Lydian mode, going up and down. And of course, that's from 12M2 to hyperspace. It's the same music. So like that. Notice the major 7th as well, which is quite common. Whoops. So, for example, here and there, we've got a major 7th as well. So it's, in a sense, a little echo of the original filigree. Like that. And repetition is used a lot in John Williams, if you think about it. So then we've got B flat Mixolydian flat 6 or E flat melodic minor scale starting with the 5th note scale with a little bit of chromatic alteration right at the top. Like that. So he doesn't always have a semitone at the end. Occasionally he has a major 2nd at the end as well. A tone, depending on if the 7th is flattened or not. So here, because there's a target note, he's putting in an extra note there. Except it's probably changing to a different chord on that beat. And of course, this is context free at the moment, although we'll go and have a look in a bit more detail with Asteroid Field. So then we've got B flat major, just a little bit of filigree here. There we go. And then suddenly moving on to 3M3, the Snow Battle, we've got Locrian modes, which are used quite extensively, actually, interestingly. With harmonic major modes as well. So in other words, a C major scale with an A flat. Like that. Notice also the register of where things are. Obviously this is quite high. And it's always it's sort of hovering around the A flat line as a sort of basic thing. And certainly not below that stave. So I'm trying to look at anything that starts off with a B flat anywhere. So B natural, middle stave, something there, but that's because it's going really high. Again, because it's going really high. And again here because it's going pretty high. So it's rarer. So generally speaking, the tessitura of things is that it's kind of hovering around that A, ledger line A or A flat, around there anyway. So that's something definitely to bear in mind. So then we got sort of A harmonic minor, but starting on the seventh note of the scale. So that's that. Then we've got, and I can never remember my harmonic minor modes as well. Somebody will just be able to just go bang, bang, bang. There we go, done. I can just never remember. Sorry about all the typos as well. I think I did this sort of quite quickly, but then there's quite a lot of material. So then C Locrian 2 with a sort of sharp 2, really. Occasionally a sort of almost resembling octatonic, but not quite. Then a Phrygian mode. And then we've got sort of G Aeolian and then octatonic with 5 notes in it. Like that. And then an interesting one, which is slightly different from the others, a sort of 10-note chromatic set. So here it's characterised usually by diminished fourths or diminished fifths. So he opens up a interval pattern. He then goes back within the interval. Then there's another interval pattern, goes back down within the interval. Slightly smaller intervals, opens up with a larger interval pattern, goes down back within the space of the interval. So G and D flat, there's a C. Then it goes above. All carefully controlled, and then it goes even higher and then back down. So E Aeolian as well. D with another sharp 2 Locrian. There we go. And F Locrian 2. Like that. That seems to be a sort of thing that he uses quite a lot. And then occasionally we had a sort of D major scale, but with a sort of hybrid note here, where it sort of kind of changes to a Lydian D because of the G sharp. Like that. But of course you got G naturals and G sharps at the same time, so that's why it's sort of a hybrid mode, mixed modality really. E flat Phrygian, there we go, and doesn't always end up on, doesn't start necessarily with the root note. It can start anywhere, and then the target note can also be anywhere as well. So this is an instance of where there's a flattened seventh at the end, not a leading note idea. Another bit of E flat Phrygian, it's exactly the same thing. There we go. And then again, and then C minor harmonic and melodic at the same time. Like that. So sort of filling in those gaps. And also starting on the 7th note of the scale. And it's this bit here where you got both the flattened leading note and the normal leading note at the same time. Then just straightforward melodic minors, Locrian modes, harmonic minors, G Dorian. That's interesting. So slightly unusual for the filigree to be lower than that B. There we go. Nice end to something. If you want to break out of a pattern, just add rests. There we go. Done. So then one of the things we'll look at is this sort of crazy sequence where we've got G harmonic minor, then G Phrygian, A flat major, then sort of suddenly going into a sort of D alter with a double flat 7, octatonic with an augmented triad, C major, B major but missing the second note of the scale, in other words the C sharp doesn't exist. Really extraordinary. We'll look at this in more detail in a minute. Yeah, absolutely balmy, isn't it? Absolutely extraordinary. So that sort of whole passage is really extraordinary. So sort of G harmonic major, but with a passing note. Then we've got A flat major, but then we've got other notes in between. So with a little bit of octatonic sort of right at the end. So sort of C sharp minor. So, and completely different. So actually that is completely octatonic. Whoops. Keep sort of shifting notes because I'm clicking too quickly. I should probably just put it in engrave mode and then it won't do it. And then it won't play it, of course. Damn it. Anyway. But not quite. So he breaks out of the octatonic mode just there. So a harmonic major again. Then we've got B major but missing the 2. And then going to F major. So this is F major here. Not sure what maybe I just forgot that. And the reason doing that is he doesn't want the 5 before having a slower note value. He doesn't want to go da 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 digga 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 digga, because then it destroys the rhythmic aspect of it. In other words, not having the C sharp between the B and the D sharp here is crucial. So he just has a gap, which is quite rare, I have to say. So just a simple sequence. Like that. And then A major. And here. So we've got a sort of G flat Lydian. G flat Lydian. Then G flat major. But then another gap. So C major. A major. But not quite. So this is where it's changing chord, and often you can see all of these sort of little chromatic shifts. They're like little sort of barkisms, and what I mean by that is that occasionally you get the sort of this sort of pattern of John Williams that, you know, he might. You know, do that sort of idea. So he sort of shifts modality halfway through the scale. It's quite awkward to play because you can't sort of really base it on any recognisable pattern. And this is an example of it where it doesn't sound quite right. And it's this bit here. Because of the E flat. Because otherwise there's no note. So otherwise you're going... You're repeating the D, because really he wants to do, sorry, that, but he can't. So he has to do that instead, and I forgot to do a flat. So I need to do, whoops, damn it. I thought, oh, that's strange. I thought I could just make it into a flat. For some reason it's not doing it. Anyway, so then we got sort of Mixolydian. E Locrian, and then sort of B major, and then the sort of semitonal trills after that. So it's really, really, really very odd. And then here's an example of sort of chromatic and octatonic, which is crash landing. For some reason that's in very small type. I don't know how that got through the net. There we go. Another example of filigree here. Yeah, where he's also using a little bit of chromaticism as well. Like that. And sort of sometimes they're hybrid scales that he's just made up. So with little bits of chromaticism. So here, but then not chromaticism, but then another semitone. Then more semitones. like that. So occasionally, and you know, sometimes they follow this sort of non-atonic scale, this idea of 3 semitones, then a gap, and then another 3 semitones, then a gap, and then another 3 semitones. The third mode of limited transposition. Quite rare in this, much more prevalent in Harry Potter. Just done a thing about the spider's cue in that. So you'll find that in there. Then we got sort of slight arpeggiaic stuff, like that, which is more sort of chordal modality, really, with sort of, you know, filling in little bits with chromaticism, like that. So this is from the Magic Tree, like that. And then we got sort of just A minor, just sort of simple stuff. Yoda raises the ship. So it didn't make much sense there. So yeah, really weird filigree there. That's a sort of typical Williams figure. So he's jumping up a diminished fifth. Actually, it's diminished sixths, actually. Kind of. But with a D flat. So sometimes he labels things sort of really weirdly. Then goes chromatically. Then another awkward interval. So here we've got a fifth, an augmented fifth. And then it becomes a perfect fifth. And then favours his, you know, little major seventh. Really, really very strange. And the important notes. Bum, bum. Ba-da-da-da-dum. Bum, bum. So it's all, everything else is just sort of gap. Really, really strange. So, yeah, just sort of one of the things that he tends to do. That's slightly different, so we won't bother looking at that. More sort of hybrid scales here. Like that, which is just pure filigree. Going up and down, and then changing things as and when you need to. So it's sort of essentially D minor, kind of. And then there's a flattened seventh, and then there's a major bit, because then it's going to G, but then going to B flat. Yeah, that's all of that's not really filigree. That's just sort of part of the melody where Han's being put in carbonite, and then we've got little bits of Through the Window. And then we've sort of seen the hyperspace bit, and then it's all the end credits. There we go. So all of the sort of end credit stuff. G minor. Ba-da-ba-dum, bum 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 bum. Like that. And that sort of ends things. So I'm going to stop using Dorico for this bit because all of my other stuff is on the other program, which I need to open and then also find the relevant little bit. So I said I would go back to the Asteroid Field. It's sort of, you know, you kind of do have to put these into context, because if you don't, it's a bit strange. So obviously they're all tend to be in there. So let's have a look at the full score SIB and have a look at the Asteroid Field, and then go to page 125. So here, so this is the where all of that filigree was before. brilliant. I mean, it's just wonderful, isn't it? It's absolutely marvellous. So the filigree tends to be, so it's going to be actually 4 flutes there. This was before I had access to the orchestrator's score. So, and occasional piano moments that just kind of articulate the ends of phrases occasionally, but it's not always there. And then we've got little bits of harp to help us, but I haven't written that down because I couldn't be bothered. So he's remarkably consistent with the orchestration in terms of, you know, that passage of music. Nothing changes in the orchestration. I mean, basically every roll is the same. And that's something to bear in mind. You know, the harmonic roll, the melodic roll, the filigree roll. The filigree at this point is in the flutes and the clarinets. So if we go to 4M3 on the reduction, so let's have a look at that. Whoops. Here we go. So we're in F major here, and then it goes to C half dim. So in this bit here. And then C flat, or B natural. Really weird sort of chord progression. Goes back to C, and then a tertiary shift, and then sort of E half dim, and then repeats, and then does it like that with the wrong note F in the bass instead of G. So in terms of the filigree and the melody, let's have a listen to that just on the piano. So it all sort of fits because it's following the harmony and also, broadly speaking, the melody as well. So this was F. So it's an F Lydian. That's okay. That works. It doesn't have to be F minor. What happens if it was? Let's have a listen. Not much difference. Not really much difference. Here we've got C half dim. So it's a sort of Locrian mode. Yeah, because essentially it's sort of D flat. So it's a sort of Locrian mode on that half dim, which is a sort of standard thing I would imagine in jazz. But then of course it has to change here because we're in B major. So if you think about sort of B major or C flat, sorry, it's a bit difficult to read because of all the flats. But it's sort of C flat, B natural. So we got the F sharp or the G natural, the G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat. So C flat major, in fact, is what that is, and then it goes into C, and it just literally changes on the chromaticism. And then to get from C to A, he just goes up a C major scale. Like that. But notice how it's starting on the second beat of the bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like that. To give it momentum. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4, bum. And, you know, often they're these large-scale sort of rhythmic patterns, and it's not just rhythm, it's the beat pattern, I suppose, or the underlying beat pattern, sometimes a chordal pattern, which is really important, and that's something to bear in mind when you're writing this sort of filigree as well, so that you know when to start the filigree. So here on the weak beat of the bar, it's the same as his sort of, you know, when he has offbeat bass. But of course, here the bass is on the downbeat, so it's something else is on the offbeat or the weaker beat. Yeah. So that's the bit where it just goes from C to D flat, and he uses D flat Lydian instead of D flat major. In the harmony, but he could have used just D flat, of course. I love that bit at the end, that sort of harmonic gliss, and then this sort of semitonal slip that Frank calls it, and then occasionally we get little dyads. So sort of hexatonic 620 and then Hungarian minor. Two classic examples of where, you know, Williams uses two different sort of, two of his main sort of sources of notes, basically pitch material, we call it. So that's all that there is for today, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and there'll be more next time I see you.